Welcome to Tea with Myrtis, Artistically Speaking, a series of conversations with artists featured in the Women Heal Through Rites and Ritual exhibition. Today's guest is Shanequa Gay, a multimedia artist who creates mythical figures, the devouts, who exist in the spiritual and physical world.
All right.
And thank you for joining me for tea time.
Awesome.
So in this series of conversations, I'm beginning by asking each one of the artists to share with us if the COVID-19 virus, has impacted their artistic production in particular.
Yes, I would say absolutely. Excuse me. I'm not able to spend as much time in my studio because of COVID-19. My studio is away from home. I'm actually currently at home. And so I pick and choose the days in which I go to my studio. I've done a good bit of production at home, but I do miss the kind of, the continuity of being able to, that routine of going to my studio, having, the time that I attend and practice and be there. I haven't had that experience because of COVID. And so this is May, and that probably subsided back in March.
So let's talk about the work that's in the exhibition.
Okay.
And you're featuring both paintings and photography. And your narrative is centered around your mythical figures, the devouts. So they are a hybrid. They are hybrid beings that appear as part woman, masked in forms shaped as birds, deer, bulls, and some of them have zebra-like legs. So I'm curious to know, what was the impetus for these mythical beings?
Well, more than anything, it was creating from my imagination. That was first and foremost, and myself freedom to, at the time, just discover, just be in a place of practice and discovery. And so, in some of my reading, life experiences, and obsessively watching videos on YouTube, I came across this discussion between Bell Hooks and Gloria Steinem, in which Gloria Steinem was talking about, over the course of 3,000 years, how Egypt removed divinity away from women and animals. And then Bell Hooks began to speak about how being in attendance to Black churches and, always seeing this white Jesus, always seeing an alternative view of yourself. One of the questions she posed was, how can Black people ever truly be free? How can we ever truly decolonize our minds if we cannot imagine a God such as ourselves? And that was such a powerful statement for me, to the point of chills, because I was like, well, yeah, isn't that true? That why wouldn't God reflect who we are? Why wouldn't we have a God that is like us? And so I began kind of delving into those questions for myself, posing questions for myself. I was already dealing with hybrid work, but mostly speaking to African-American male experiences and social work. So I had created this body of work called the Fair Game Project, and it was mostly solely focused on Black men and the hybridized experiences that they were having. But I was like, one, I have outrage fatigue. from plowing the field for social work with my work, but I wanted to be able to keep the hybridity and speak to this notion of a godlike form as ourselves, and taking characteristics such as strength and power and dignity and honor and grace and privilege and purity and all of the things that make up the women I feel like in my family, and how can I transfer that to this kind of imagined godlike form? And I began to think about the devouts, and I've used the terminology devout from how I feel like the Black women in my family are so very devoted, right? I'm from the Bible Belt, I'm from Georgia, I'm on the, grew up in a very devout Christian upbringing. My mother is a pastor. I have pastors, preachers, and teachers in my family. And so looking for ways to transfer my belief system into a kind of new belief system, into this place of freedom of imagination and creating these kind of godlike figures. And so I would say the impetus for this imagination would definitely be things like Alice in Wonderland, The Wiz. When we're talking about myth and storytelling, where is that language for us as Black people, right? So we had a break in being able to develop those experiences here as slaves. We have whole 400 years of our imagination being kind of disturbed. And so because I feel like I want to delve into that place of freedom now, I came up with these mythical creatures. And I know that's long.
No, but it's a wonderful response. And I want to just go back just a little bit into that because I'm curious to know who the women are behind the mask. And you may have provided a clue with your response, but could you expand upon that a little bit more?
The specific women are artsy friends and cousins and family members that are actually behind the mask, fellow creatives. During grad school, I literally just graduated back in 2019. So during grad school back in 2018, in the latter part of the fall, I had about 9 or 10 friends come to my studio and took pictures of them. And I was utilizing them as study at first, solely as study, using these photographs to, later use as references for my paintings. I had them wear all white because there is nothing more deaconess than all white.
Yes, amen.
And I had them wear these black and white striped socks. And black and white striped socks were one, I was trying to think about the ways that, right, so I'm speaking to social issues and speaking to Black women and speaking to this kind of, the way we're viewed. It's either Black or white. We never have this gray area. I was thinking about, as Issa Rae was talking about, when are Black people ever just bland? Be allowed to be just bland, just kind of regular. So it's kind of black and white view. And then we also thinking about stripes and the way that kind of came into the fabrication of our materiality. Now, stripes were initially used to speak about your class. And so I wanted to speak to class structures, and I'm always looking for ways of undoing, right? So one of the things I love about us as a people within the diaspora is that we always take the negative and turn it into a positive. And so I was looking for ways to build up through what is considered something that's demeaning, right? So while unfortunate, we took the N word, turned it into a language of endearment. And, even what you see the ladies holding, watermelon, and chicken and Kool-Aid. A lot of times thought to be like this negative stereotype, but I was looking for ways to use it and make it holy. So they'll see watermelon as something holy. So when you're thinking about where we even got watermelon from, it's found in Egyptian tombs. And they were using it as a way to cultivate water holdings. It was also placed in the tombs as this kind of sacrificial object. And so I wanted to use that for myself and to, again, take that negative stereotype of Black people in watermelon and turn it into this holy offering. And I hope I'm answering.
No, the symbolisms are very powerful. So I really appreciate you delving into that and really explaining that in the way that you did. It was very informative. So talk to us about, well, I'm going to digress with my thoughts and go back to another question I have, and that is about the titles, which are lowercase. And I was very curious to know that, and also want people to know that it's not a mistake on our website, that is intentional on your behalf, and why.
Sure. So I believe back in 2010, in having a conversation with a sister friend of mine, and we began, again, bell hooks is a definite inspiration for all of us as Black women, or at least I feel like she should be. But bell hook's name is in lowercase. And as we begin to discuss and have this conversation about who she is and how important her language is, to the experience of Black women, we began to just type everything that we ever discussed. Everything was in lowercase. And so it began as a sister language between she and I. And I have just moved from that, a decade later to most of my correspondences, whether it's in text, whether it's in post, it is all in language that is lowercase. And so when you think about the ways that we code, right? So for me, or for the, African American community or African Ascendant community, coding, secrecy is a form of, of our culture. It's a part of who we are. And so taking that level of coding and secrecy as my own way of relaying language. And for me, that kind of underscoring and lowercase lettering is just me relaying my own language in my work.
Wonderful. I love it. And I love bell hooks, so I'm so happy to know that she's the influence for that.
She's amazing.
Yeah, she is. I mean, she's a genius. I mean, she really, really is. Yeah. So unpack for us summoning.
Sure.
The painting, yes.
Summoning is this, I believe it has a gold background.
Yes, it does.
Figures, 4 women figures who are kneeled, and they're kneeled between a material and a holy space, and they're on a spiritual plane. And so for me, I consider that something you'll find throughout my work is the galaxies and the stars. For me, those are representations of heaven or a paradise. And us being able to command both spaces, that material and spiritual world, that is something that is often spoke about biblically, and not just biblically, across spiritual language, that material and spiritual space. And so for me, the best way that I can relay a paradise is that we have command even in the galaxies, and that we can take control in both of those areas. And the way that we take control is through prayer, is through intercession. I know no women more powerful in prayer than Black women. And so,
amen. Amen.
About can grandmama get a prayer through for you?
Yes, yes. Your grandmother prays for you. Then you're prayed up, as they used to say.
You are prayed up.
Yes,
your
I
mama
know I'm prayed up.
prayed up for you. Then when you talk about how we are able to push forward, or push through, we push forward and push through song and through prayer. And so I'm trying to relay that through that summoning, through that gathering of women together as a power structure. And that power structure is through spirituality, is through prayer, is through that summoning, to call on to attend, to gather, to meet together in prayer.
Thank you. And I love the interaction between the woman and the young girl in acceptance, the photograph. Can you talk about that relationship and the meaning behind that piece?
Acceptance was a part of this photograph series that I had done for an exhibition called Initiation. Thinking about how are African American girls initiated into womanhood. So when you think about the ways that maybe African sisters are initiated, that they actually have a time in which they are fat and go through fattening ceremonies where they are told about how to become and be a wife. Like you're actually initiated into how do we initiate our daughters into a place of acceptance, initiate them into a place of womanhood, the way that the mother and daughter look back and forth at each other as though they are a mirror. And that actually is a mother and daughter looking at each other. They mirrored each other. And so I can think of no better way to show an endearment, to show that you are whole, than when a mother looks at you and says that you are accepted. And she doesn't have to say it, right? She says it with her eyes. Enough. Mothers have just this knowing. And this language that's being relayed almost like a telepathy to you, that you are enough, and they don't have to say it through the words. And I feel like I was trying to capture that in the photograph, that you are enough. And she does, and there's a delicacy about it. There is a language that's being relayed without words. The way the daughter ever so gently puts her hand on her mother's heart. And mind you, I didn't tell them to do that. This is performed to me in a natural situation between a mother and daughter. Is just is beautiful. It was beautiful. I can't think of a better capture in this kind of cosplay situation where they both have on these masks, but they are still speaking a human language without words.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's very loving and tender. The interaction between them is just very sincere, and you can feel the love, the energy between the two, the level of respect she has, the endearment. I mean, it's really impactful.
They're loving each other. They are honoring one another.
Yes.
In a place of respect. It's just it's the mother and daughter just speaking to one another, and it's like, yo, how did we get there?
That was great. It was great, and you captured it so beautifully. It's wonderful. So I'm also interested in knowing and having you talk about the reason that you carried your story from painting to photography, or from photography to painting. I'm not sure which came first, but I love the way in which there's this continuation of spirituality and physicality between the figures and just the narrative, the commentary that's going on between both bodies of work.
Yeah, I began the photographs first. And I was initially looking at the photographs only as studies for painting. And as I began to go through them, there was something happening, because I, by and large, would not necessarily coin myself as a photographer. I have a lot of reference work, but there was something very different about this body of work that not only captured my attention, but other people's attention as I, as they were strolling around in my studio space. Specifically speaking to the photographs, like, what is this, and where did it come from, and who took these? It's like me. Took these pictures, but it just really, I would say, it strengthened my narrative. It postured them in kind of this human form, right? These women wearing masks and kind of in play with one another, and in ceremony. They almost look like they're in ceremony. There is a level of public and private, because there are certain scenes that it feels like, should I be seeing this? Missing this? Should I be a part of this? And it just really, to me, helped strengthen what I was doing in my paintings. And I don't see one without the other. I see them as all a part of this oeuvre, a part of this body of work.
Well, the execution in both mediums is just really superior and beautifully done. So my last question is about your video, The Crooked Room. In it, the Devouts are performing a dance, and we hear a voice of Melissa Harris Paring discussing cognitive psychology research and field perception, which is, she said, what we see and how what we see impacts how we figure out where we are in space. And she's using this analogy as she's talking about her book and discussing the topics of sister citizen shame, stereotypes, and Black women in America. So I was wondering, one, if you could tell us about the video, and two, why you felt it important to overlay her words, overlay what her comments on top of that video, and the relevance of it.
Your responsibility as a subject was to find the straight up and down. So everything around you, everything in your perceptual field is off kilter. Your responsibility is to see if you can figure out what is straight up and down. Now, some people are field independent, and despite all these crooked images around them, they're able to find the straight up and down. But most people, the vast majority of us, are field dependent. And when all the stimuli around us tell us that the world is tilted like this, we can tilt ourselves as much as 45 degrees, but experience ourselves perceptually as straight up and down because we're in line with the crooked images. Again, this is not research on race. It's not research on gender. It's not research on politics. But the first time I encountered this, I said, oh, that is just like being a black woman in America, right?
It was initially experimentation.
Mm-hmm.
It just seemed to mesh really well with what the women were doing. So they are basically doing a kind of ring around the rosy, kind of this musical chairs, kind of this hand in hand. And for me, that is a kind of witchery, right? So it makes me think of Macbeth. And, you know, the beginning of Macbeth has the three witches, right? Where they're double, toil and trouble.
Yes.
Like when you're thinking of what I love about Shakespeare is the women didn't necessarily have power other than their words, other than their language. And so when I'm also thinking about maybe old school African American women in the South not being able to have power in a way, and I don't even say old school, I would say that's even still unfortunately relevant in the 21st century. I was looking for ways to depict this power and this kind of imagining this being able to shift between worlds. So there's a level of, kind of cognitive dissonance happening, not just with Melissa speaking, but the women kind of have this 3D dimensional form to them. They shift, they go back.
Yes.
They're circular. And for me, I'm trying to, create this kind of cosmos, galaxy, spiritual world where they are empowered in the space that they're in. And what I love about Melissa Harris Perry's, what she's giving basically a stint from her book Sister Citizen, and talking about cognitive dissonance and that feeling of being a Black woman in a cricket room. And it really helped to relay this tilt, this bend, this shift, and the symmetry that happens in their mask, right? And what they have on, that what they are, I would consider adorned with. And it is the experience of a Black woman, right? To feel like in one way, like you are on cloud 9, right? Because there is this way that, or the experience of being a melanated being, that you just feel like you're on cloud 9, you're high all the time. And so it's confusing when you see something alternative to that, be it on television or social media, or someone says something absolutely ignorant about Black women. It's this confusion that you have in being in a world that is tilted, bent, and shifted in the way that you are being viewed. And, when you're talking about masking, I love the ways that in some ways we mask, and by and large, sometimes we can be deceptive. We can pretend to not know. And there's a power in pretending not to know in order to keep yourself safe, in order to keep your family safe, in order to keep who you are as a people safe. And so I was trying to relay all of those things through that video. That's a lot. I think that's heavy laden in trying to relay, but that was the premises of it.
Yeah, I had to watch it a couple of times to digest it fully and to really take in Melissa's words and your imagery and understand the pairing. But in the end, it all comes together because of what she says about the existence of a Black woman and how we navigate the world and a room. And then your figures, your mythical figures that are performing with the same kind of rhythm and thought by which Melissa's words are being delivered. So it's a genius piece. I mean, it's one that needs to be studied by psychologists and psychiatrists because it's deep.
What Melissa is saying is almost sermonic. It sounds like a sermon for me.
Oh, yeah.
How it relates to me as a Black woman. It also sounds to maybe another culture, another gender, another person. But for me, I hear it as a sermon. It's like, well, yeah,
Yeah, because there is a rhythm to it. If there is a rhythm, it is that message that's being delivered from on high.
Right.
And then you look at the imagery and it just resonates. It's really quite fascinating what you've done with that piece. And I encourage people to really take it in with a note, a paper and pen handy, so you can like write down, wow, I can't believe what I'm witnessing here, and how amazing that comes together in the end. It's a really powerful piece.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Well, thank you. This has been really, really wonderful. I look forward to your visit in Baltimore. We are going to kick off a reception at some point when the world opens up to us here. And I'm just going to put it out in the universe that you will be here to celebrate with the hundreds of thousands of individuals that are going to come out and join us in this wonderful exhibition, that I get to experience daily, and am so excited to share with the world.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Myrtis. This was a great, quick conversation.
Yeah, this was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for your time today. Bye-bye.